We are continuing to scrutinise the podcast created by Ian Doyle in association with the Irish Sun. And as I've explained previously, it is a 12-part podcast, but the casts that we are interested in are the ones that cover Pat Marry's investigation of the Modern robbery at Lordship Credit Union. And I think it's important to point out once again, as we have done previously, when we speak about sloppy journalism and the mainstream media's involvement in Aaron's case. And I think we have documented that well over the course of over 150 videos, and a number of those were highlighting the way the media covered Aaron's case and how they covered the whole investigation prior to Aaron being arrested and afterwards. And this podcast here that was created by Ian Doyle in association with Stephen Breen, he's an editor in the Irish Sun and the Irish Sun itself, it shows quite clearly that the media are peddling the same lies and misinformation that was generated during the course of Aaron's trial by the authorities. So that's the reason for we couldn't really care less about any of these media people or their publications. But it gives us a tool to show you, the public, exactly how the court case was run and how this story and narrated and curated storyline was created by the prosecution and on Garda Síochána. And to that end, that is how we have ended up with such an unsafe conviction, which I think we've proven clearly during the course of Aaron's campaign. So we're going to move on now and continue to scrutinise it. We're staying at podcast number 10, entitled Chest Pains, and this is the second video we are putting out to scrutinise and look at some of the information given in podcast number 10, Chest Pains. Please go and listen to these podcasts, and hopefully you'll get a feel for what we're trying to get across in Aaron's campaign. So we'll go ahead now and we listen to the first clip in this video.
Stephen Breen is crime editor for the Irish Sun.
Aaron Brady emerges very quickly as a suspect because the Gardaí would have known about his modus operandi in terms of the other robberies that had taken place within the border region in the 2 years prior to Adrian Donoghue being shot dead. So he was also living close to the area as well.
We knew and could prove too he was involved in creeper burglaries and stealing cars and selling them. Breaking into your house, taking your keys in your car from your driveway and selling it on. And that's what he was involved in.
If I can just refer you back to the last clip in yesterday evening's video in relation to Ian Doyle explaining that the PSNI had some interaction with Aaron when they came to search a property with a search warrant. And we said very clearly that event never took place. It was completely and utterly made up. And again, this follows through once again. We have Stephen Breen here talking about a modus operandi for Aaron Brady around the border in the previous 2 years prior to the Modern robbery at Lordship Credit Union. Like, Aaron Brady has never been even questioned about any of these things. It was never put to him, and obviously if there was evidence there, as Pat Marry says, we knew Aaron Brady was doing these things. It would have been vital for the authorities to put this to Aaron Brady and to put it forward during the course of the court and the trial. But there has to be some reason why they didn't, and the reason they didn't is because it's simply made up. And it's there to create a false narrative, and it's there once again to create a story that simply does not exist. And as we move on, we can see again how they're trying to create a modus operandi, and in this next clip it's something similar, but it's a little bit more sinister because of Aaron's association with suspect B, and how once again we can see very clearly in this clip coming up how Mr. Marry's rabbit hole becomes more enticing to him and Sergeant John Maroney as they take the investigation in the completely wrong direction. So we listen to the second clip now.
In 2011, the credit union was subject to another raid. This one more lucrative, with the thieves netting over €22,000 in cash before making their getaway.
And the modus operandi of that robbery fitted very like the robbery where Adrian was killed. And we had a suspect at that time, and he was arrested and brought in for questioning.
After Brady was stopped roadside on the morning after the shooting, the first person he rang was the man suspected of carrying out the previous credit union raid.
So here we have a person who was a suspect for the first armed robbery in contact with Aaron Brady the next day. And in actual fact, as we continued on the investigation, that person who was suspect for the first armed robbery had spent the day with Aaron Brady and another person on the day of the robbery. So, you know, things were just not all sitting right for someone to say they were innocent, like, you know.
Once again in this clip we hear Pat Marry speaking about the raid in 2011. Firstly, it was stated quite categorically in court that Aaron Brady had nothing to do with the previous raid in Lordship Credit Union 2011, and indeed it only mentions really suspect B here. And Pat Marry again mentions modus operandi being similar. Now that could be questioned because as far as I know in 2011 the vehicle actually drove into the car park of the Lordship Credit Union, didn't block any gateway, and there was no armed Garda with the credit union workers in 2011. So nobody came over the wall, and there was no one hiding behind the wall or travelled through fields. So to say the modus operandi is the same is questionable. But again, it suits the storyboard created here by Mr. Marry and the mainstream media and indeed the authorities. And again, we see very clearly here how the rabbit hole that Pat Marry and the other members of Garda Síochána in the incident room went down the wrong track completely at the beginning. And there is no doubt Aaron did call suspect B on the Saturday morning, and they were in each other's company on the Friday. But if I take you back very briefly, if you've watched the previous videos, Pat Marry enabled Detective Kieran Reedy to create a list of suspects that might be involved in the Northern robbery. And this was done on the night of the Northern robbery at Lordship Credit Union. And Kieran Reedy made out the list, and Pat Marry has told us himself that everyone on the list was accounted for except Aaron Brady, which was very strange to say the least. But again, you can see when you're telling lies and things become tangled, you tend to get found out. So we have to assume that Kieran Reedy wouldn't be that stupid. He may have suspect B's name on the list. And everyone was checked on the list, and as far as we are aware, suspect B was at home, and there is alibis and testimony to prove that. But we can't go into that in too much detail because of oncoming and court cases that may be coming very shortly. So what he's telling us in one part of the podcast and what he's telling us here in this part of the podcast are totally at odds with each other. And again, you can see why, because Aaron was in contact with suspect B on Saturday morning and was with suspect B on the Friday. Again, we can see where Mr. Marry came with the assumptions. Aaron told the lies at the roundabout on the Saturday morning to Sergeant John Maroney. And again, we can see where Mr. Marry, Sergeant John Maroney and the incident room went down the wrong track. And by the time Mr. Marry had been reined back, coming into August and the end of the year in 2013, it was too late, and vital information was gone in the ether from the real gang that did commit the Northern robbery at Lordship Credit Union. And we're going to see in this clip here again another person who is named as a suspect, and then that didn't suit the narrative and he disappeared. And the absolute nonsense in creating a storyboard again that makes absolutely no sense. So we'll listen to this third little clip here and then we'll discuss that as well.
4 nights before, suspect A's brother, who lived nearby the credit union, rang the Gardaí from his home. He stated there were suspicious looking men dressed in black hanging around the outskirts of his property, potentially eyeing up a break-in attempt. Garda Robert Pilo was among the first respondents. He walked over and chatted away to the brother of suspect A. The two men made small talk briefly as he gave a vague description of what he felt he saw. Pilo took 15 minutes to investigate the scene and conclusively found no sign of a break-in attempt or intruders on the property. He noted that there was a heavy dew on the grass, but no trail of footsteps left behind. At the time, the call-out didn't come across as suspicious. Everyone has a right to be concerned about their own property. But after Adrian's shooting, the Gardaí were able to establish suspect A's brother was most likely involved in a scoping exercise for the gang to test how long it would take for Gardaí to respond to an emergency call.
I think this little short clip highlights very well the collusion and the coziness between the Garda Síochána and the mainstream media. They speak here about suspect A's brother being involved in a scoping exercise to get some sort of information in relation to times to Garda responding to a call just on the Cooley Peninsula. Such a load of bullshit. It just beggars belief that any journalist could actually buy into this nonsense. And it's very simple why. If I put up on the screen here, you can see where CU is. That's where the credit union is. Now, when the call went in from Detective Joe Ryan at the time of the Modern robbery, there could very well have been a vehicle at point number 1 there. That's in and around Ballymascanlon roundabout, which would leave the response time less than a minute. There may very well have been a vehicle sitting at point number 2. That's the bypass in round Dundalk at the Dundalk Racecourse. So there would have been 2 minutes away, possibly a little bit more. At point number 3, a Garda vehicle sitting in the centre of the town could be 4 minutes away. And then if we go to point 4, that's where the barracks is, at that area of Dundalk, could have been maybe five minutes away. Blue lights, probably 5 minutes to Lordship Credit Union. And it is not beyond the bounds of possibility that there could have been a Garda vehicle driving along the peninsula at point number 5 and be within actually seconds of the raid at Lordship Credit Union. So to try and put the two together is absolutely nonsense. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And then we have to believe that a number of young men were planning to rob the credit union on a Friday night, and someone thought it was a good idea to ring the guards on a Tuesday night to bring them out to the house and put them on the radar. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it just makes absolutely no sense. And another very important point that the journalists didn't look into here, and if they knew anything about the case whatsoever, either Breen or Doyle, suspect A's brother was mentioned on numerous occasions by Brendan Graham and the other members of the prosecution team, and indeed mentioned by members of Garda Síochána as being part of the gang. But when the authorities realised that we had found the CCTV footage of suspect A's brother and the testimony that he was in his own house at the time of the Modern robbery, suspect A's brother disappeared out of the gang. The gang got even smaller. And this is another aspect where any journalist would have asked, but Mr. Marry, you're saying that this was a scoping exercise. But what about, I thought he was part of the gang, this suspect A's brother. And the mainstream media plastered it all over the newspapers, brothers in Boston. And yet that has disappeared. I am not sure, But I would sincerely hope that these investigative journalists are asking on Garda Síochána, well, this man was part of the gang initially. He was named in court in October 2019. Has he suddenly disappeared? So that's 7 years after the murder, that all the investigation, the biggest investigation ever, and they'd named the two brothers. And yet, when push came to shove, it's quite obvious that suspect A's brother, impossible, could not be there. CCTV footage and testimony placed him quite clearly in his own home. So I hope those few clips have shown how the media are working with and perpetuating the case, the actual case put forward by Pat Marry and the incident room in Dundalk. That they followed a narrative and went down a rabbit hole. I keep repeating this. And they've told us why they went down the rabbit hole. And yes, there's no gang. Pat Marry and Sergeant John Maroney in late January, early February 2013, I'm sure they did believe that Suspect B was in contact with Aaron Brady, but by the time the investigation had shown clearly that neither Suspect A, Suspect B or Aaron Brady was anyone near the credit union, it was too late. And the fact that a member of Garda Síochána has lost his life, they made a complete mess of the initial investigation, and they continued on the path to create a narrative and a storyboard that simply does not exist. And I will say once again, the person and the persons involved and were there and were the people who took Detective Adrian Donoghue's life that night in Lordship Credit Union are still walking free. And something has to be done to right a very serious wrong for everyone involved. Aaron Brady is not the man who shot and murdered Detective Garda Adrian Donoghue. We've proven it beyond any shadow of a doubt, and I think we are proving now, and I hope showing very clearly that the storyline perpetuated by the authorities is absolute nonsense. And we will continue to show that, highlight that and publicise that, because we will not allow the same to happen again in upcoming court cases and during the course of Aaron's appeal. And at some point in time, the media will have to respond and just ask the questions. That's all we have ever asked. Fairness, ask the questions, let's see the whole story, not just part of it, not the part that is curated and manufactured by corrupt authorities. So we have another video to put out tomorrow evening in respect of the last couple of parts of podcast number 10, Chest Pains. And it will highlight once again the serious downfall of the investigation. And it does actually get progressively worse. So once again, thank you for watching. Please like, comment and share. And please pop over onto our YouTube channel and subscribe there. We need your help with those like and subscribe buttons to help with our algorithms to ward off the attempts by the authorities to interfere with Aaron's campaign online. So once again, thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow evening with the rest of the video in relation to podcast number 10. Thank you.